Welcome to the show, Jason Bible, Texas Real Estate Mastermind. Today's show, the death of the 7% mortgage. So, if you have been following along for the last couple of days, Federal Reserve met. They said, "Hey, we're going to do a quarter point raise." And then if you read between the lines, this sounds like the last increase in rates. I think we're pretty much done here. So, what I have watched for the month of March alone is our rates started at 7.1. That was March 2nd. By the way, if you're looking for this data, you can go to MBS News Daily. It's mortgage news. Actually, it's mortgage-backed security news daily, but it's MBS News Daily. You click at the top, you click at, I think you click rates, and then see today's rate, and then you can see all the charts and graphs and look at the historic stuff and all that. So March 2nd, we hit a high. I think that was a high for the year at 7.1. If I'm not mistaken, that was higher than October. Like it was an all-time high since the 80s. Don't quote me on that because I just don't have the chart sitting in front of me. It was high, 7.1. And as of this broadcast, as I'm recording this broadcast, we are at 6.44 in less than a month. We lost 0.6% interest. The rate reduced by 0.6% in less than 30 days. That's a huge move. Huge. It's about 10%. That's a giant drop in rates. Why is that such a big deal, Jason? Simple. We start getting into the fives, it's game on. It's going to make the COVID rally look like nothing you've ever seen. This market's going to be so hot that you're not even going to know what to do with yourself. We get into the fives. Now, this is prime paper. This is 30-year notes, 800 credit score, prime paper, good jobs, long job history, good income, saving, the whole shoot match. We're talking about prime paper here, good borrowers. That hits 5% and it is on. In fact, we saw a big jump in December and January. In fact, month over month from January to February, sales were up 15% month over month. What's really interesting, if you adjust for seasonality, we are back to the same number of sales as we were a year ago. I know that's hard for people to understand, but when you put the math on it, do a little analysis, we're actually already back to where we were before rates were going up. So here's what makes this market different. We are still 50% below inventory of 2019. 50% below. And 2019 was really low. We really need to have in this country about 1.2 to 1.5 million houses available for sale. I think we're at like 900,000, maybe a mil. It's bad. So what's going to happen? Rates are going to go up. And you better pray inventory comes back. There better be some houses to buy. Because if there's not, you're going to see multiple offer situations as bad as COVID. It's going to be absolutely bananas. Prices are going to skyrocket if we get into the fives. If we have another month like we had in March, we're going to end April 5859. Now, the real fireworks, and I tend to agree with this, I'm hearing this from Logan over at Housing Wire, and I'm hearing this from Mike over at Altos Research. And when I get into Adam data, I read the same thing. We get into 5.5%, oh, it's game over. There will be buyers flooding this market. Truth be told, when you get to around 5.2 to 5.3% in a 30-year mortgage, you're at break even, meaning you're paying as much in principal as you are in interest over a 30-year note. And really, technically, if you really get into the nerd math, when you include inflation and all that other stuff, and if you're at 7% or below, you're actually doing better than break even. Break even for the cost of capital in real estate is about 7%. I'm not going to get into all the math. I know a couple of you guys are going to ask. I'm going to get 900 emails. I'm like, just do a little Google search and do a little reading. 7% is really break even. But 5%, 5.2, 5.3, is where you will pay as much interest as you do principal on a 30-year loan. But what we're seeing is prices aren't falling. Certain markets, they are. But here's what I can tell you. In Houston, Texas, if you look at neighborhoods that sell at least 30 houses a year, and I pull the data every single month, so if you read the HAR data right now in Houston, it says we lost 0.5% year over year. But if you look at neighborhoods that sell at least 30 houses a year, under $350,000, those houses appreciated 12% over the same time period, which is mostly what we buy. We mostly buy in that 350 and below. Now, right now, I'm making offers and buying stuff above 350. Why? Because that market slowed way down. I am all in that higher end market right now. I am negotiating a handful of deals that their after repaired value are close to $1 million. And I'm not talking about commercial or multifamily. These are single family houses. Jason, why would you do that? It's because I know at some point rates are going to drop and those buyers are going to come back. One of the dynamics I missed is that higher priced homes are much more rate sensitive than lower priced homes. And the question is why? Because they don't have to move if they don't want to. They got money, they're good. But in that first time home buyer market below 350, your choice is either rent or live with mama. That's really your choice. And you know what? At some point, you don't care how high the rate is because you ain't living with mama anymore. So here's what I'll tell you guys. I said rates will be lower by the end of the year. I was getting a little nervous with that prediction when we hit 7.1 in March. I was like, whoa. And then I was like, this can't last. The Federal Reserve, Congress, and it's an election year, the executive branch cannot weather. Now, this is where you go, well, Jason, the Federal Reserve is a separate body. Bull. That's total BS. We have a DA in New York right now trying to take down the former president for a misdemeanor. Like it makes no sense at all. Absolutely none. So you think they're going to allow the economy to go into a huge recession? Not likely. And the other thing I told you is we can't stop inflation with interest rates anyway. Most of our inflation is supply side inflation. There ain't enough goods. And a lot of that has to do with the constraints during COVID. This is what they call an exogenous event. That's the economic term for it. There was a global pandemic. It wasn't necessarily the pandemic, it was the shutdowns. So we shut everything down for 2 years, and now the stuff you want to buy, we're not making any of that stuff. It's too bad. It just takes that long. You can't just turn a factory off and then turn it back on. We get back from the break, I'm going to talk more about the death of the 7% mortgage. Jason Bible, Texas Real Estate Mastermind. All right, ready to go? It's Jason Bible, Texas Real Estate Mastermind. So we started the month 7.1. And then what happened? We had a little banking crisis on our hands. By the way, we're not out of that yet. So this is what Jerome Powell really said last week. He said, all right, guys, here's the deal. We're going to bump this 25 bips. By the way, 2 weeks before, it was like an 80% chance we were going to get a 50 bip raise. And a little banking crisis got everybody all scared. The other thing, and this is something Logan said, and I think it's really true. He said, thank God Fannie and Freddie Mac are still in conservatorship and they're not publicly traded. And let me explain what that means. One of the problems in 2008 is Fannie and Freddie, they were packaging up mortgages. The federal government, through Fannie and Freddie, were insuring those mortgages, but they were publicly traded companies. It was kind of this quasi-public-private thing. When they essentially became insolvent after the financial crisis in '08 and the real estate market crash, they were given to the government to run. And since they're really not profit-driven, although they do make a lot of money, and they are a pretty critical part of the credit process in the United States, that they really didn't expand their business, meaning they didn't lower credit requirements like down payment, rates, all that stuff. They kept it pretty tight. If you look at post loans made after 2009, like 80% of them are a 720 credit score or higher. I read since we started increasing rates, the average credit score is something like 790. I mean, that's insane. So the only people that are buying homes right now are those that are the absolute grade A borrowers. That's why I kept saying there's not going to be this crash because these people can't afford their homes. We only lent to people who had stellar credit. This is why I get worried about the owner finance crowd, because there's a lot of these investors that do owner finance to buyers that have like zero credit score. And we don't know what that default rate looks like. All I know is it's high. There's a reason your credit score is 0. So here's what I'll tell you guys. If we in April get close to 5, this summer selling season is going to be absolutely insane. There are already not enough houses for demand. I got a buddy of mine I talked about on a previous show. He's a flipper, flipping 3 or 4 houses right now. They're all in the market. He said, I got 12 offers in a week, all above list, in a 7% world. What do you think that's going to be like in a 5% world? He's probably going to get 40 offers. By the way, he builds fantastic houses. His houses are beautiful. So these are, for the neighborhoods they're in, they're the absolute best house in the neighborhood, which is the whole point of flipping a house. That's what you're supposed to do. So those rates drop, you're going to see, and it'll start in April. That's all I'm saying. Like if we get some crazy data that says they got to raise rates because inflation's 9,000%, they do something stupid like that, then we'll run into a problem. But I don't see rates going up. If they do, maybe another quarter bip. That's it. I really don't, or 25 bips. I really don't see them going up more than a quarter point. I don't know how they would make the case. They backed off a quarter point last week. And in fact, it was almost, and up until the time, so Wall Street bets on these things. Up until the time the actual meeting and the FOMC notes came out, they were even debating not even doing a quarter, maybe stay where we're at. So I believe what I shouldn't say a lot of analysts, the analysts that really follow this, I believe what they say, and that is we are really close to the end of this thing. I was watching the 10-year today, and I've been watching the MBS market. We went from 7.1 to 6.44 in like 29 days. That's fast. We knew there was a rate hike coming in March. Here's a crazy thing. We knew a rate hike was coming in March. We just didn't know how much. More than likely it was going to be 50. Ended up being a quarter. Rates plummeted. Almost 10% in 29 days. So here is what savvy investors are doing right now. They're not waiting for rates to keep going down, because here's the problem. If you keep waiting, you're going to have more investors and more homeowners competing with you for the same property. You need to be buying as much as you can right now. Right now. I'll give you a prediction. If things hold like I think they will be refinancing these properties next year, maybe in the 4s. My guess is we're going to bump into something. A little recession, election year, a little, something, the Democrats got to win. And they're not going to let the Republicans tell them the economy's terrible. Good way to do that is lower rates. Just juice those rates. So it's going to be really interesting over the next year. But I'm about 50% certain that we're going to be refinancing a lot of properties in the 4s and low 5s next year. Now, like I said, you can wait, but guess what? That house is going to cost you $50,000 more if you wait a year. That's why I think it's so funny. I'm like, we do a lot of commercial loans here. And the first year has a 5-point prepayment penalty. And I'm like, I don't care. And everyone's like, well, why don't you care? I'm like, because on a $500,000 house, that's only $25,000. So if I buy it now and refinance it in a year, and my rates dropped in half, but that house is worth $60,000, $80,000 more, I don't mind paying that prepayment penalty. Who cares? I saved money because I bought earlier in the equity cycle. I think that's what a lot of investors miss. A bunch of investors tried to get into the market during COVID and found out that it was so hot, so competitive that they were already too late. You have to buy before the upside. By the way, that's what causes the upside. There's more demand than there is supply. So you have this massive demand input into an asset class, this demand just tsunami, and prices go up. By the way, they rarely ever come down. We get those rates into the 5s, and we're only 44 bips away. You are going to see a market that goes absolutely bananas. It is going to be wild. Now, for you investors out there, one of the things I'll tell you is I would really look at traditional mortgages right now. The question is why? Heck, maybe even 5-1 ARMs. Here's why. We know rates are going down, but if you buy something with a traditional mortgage, and you can have about 10 of those in your name, depending on a couple of factors, but you can have 10 Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac traditional mortgages in your name. Now, Jason, why would I do that? Well, one is they're cheaper. They're less expensive to get, and the rates are lower, but they don't have a prepayment penalty. So if I know in the next year or two I'm refining, I could save myself a couple of bucks. In the short term, when I buy the property, in the medium term, while I'm renting the property and my rates are a little bit lower, but then when I refinance, there's no penalty for me to refi. Now, here's the downside. Those traditional mortgages are a nightmare to get. I shouldn't say they're a nightmare. They're just a pain. They want to see all your tax returns. They want to see that $500 you spent on your wife's Christmas present, and you have to write a letter about it. Like it's all that nonsense. They want to get hair follicle samples. They're going to need blood samples. They have to interview your boss, the HR department. Like, it's that kind of nonsense. But it could save you some big bucks later on down the road when you refinance these things all at once. So like I said, I don't see the 7% mortgage coming back. I just don't know what scenario they would want to raise rates, and they're going to have to raise them a lot to get there. This is Jason Bible, Texas Real Estate Mastermind. All right. Ready to go? It's Jason Bible, Texas Real Estate Mastermind. So it's over, folks. That's it. Game's over. High rates are over. They only go down from here. I'm calling the top. 7.1 was the top. That's it. 4 months ago, I was watching Valuetainment, and I like Patrick over there. He's a good dude. His whole team over there, they're fantastic. Podcasts they put on are great. He's got a real estate guy on there, and it popped up in my YouTube feed today. Get ready for 10% mortgages. And I'm like, dude, what are you talking about? It was 4 months ago. They thought the mortgage is going to go 10%. I'm like, they might go up a little bit more, but I don't see 10%. 10 is a lot. Didn't happen. We got to 7. I remember guys early in this cycle were like, 15% mortgages. I'm like, no, that ain't going to happen either. 8s? Sure. 9s? That's possible. 10? Double digits? Ooh, I don't know. I don't know about that one. There's something magical about crossing the pantheon of a double-digit mortgage. I think that really would have crushed the industry. And here's the problem. What happens when rates drop? They used to have to hire all these people back. There's not enough real estate agents. There's not enough title companies. Like, there's a real problem when the industry shrivels up like that. So 7% mortgage is dead. Gone. Ain't coming back anytime soon. So it's going to be real interesting to see what the next month brings us. Like I said, we're getting close to the summer buying season. I'm going to be watching those mortgage applications. So mortgage app data. So typically, mortgage applications precede purchases. So when people start, homeowners, home buyers, start hearing mortgage rates have gone down, then they go down to their local branch, go down to their local mortgage loan officer originator office. I don't know. They go to their loan guy or gal. They go, all right, looks like rates are coming down. You know, wife's been talking about getting a house with a pool and a bigger this and a bigger yard, or let's move from Woodlands to the Heights, or whatever we're doing. Let's go ahead and get pre-qualified. So they get an application, they run it through their little computer system, and that data gets reported up through the Mortgage Bankers Association. And basically says, hey, we got all these people that are applying for mortgages. What happens next? Well, if rates don't go up a whole lot, or even if they stay the same, that means a certain percentage of those mortgage apps will turn into sales. It's a precursor to the show. And my guess is in April, you're probably not going to see it in the March data. So we're going to see it in May. Actually, it gets reported weekly. So you'll start to see the weekly mortgage app data. But you're really going to see it in May for what happens in April. And then by the time tail end of May comes around, you're going to get these investors. I think the investors are the slowest people in the marketplace. I'm starting to realize that. I think homeowners, retail home buyers are the only ones that have a clue what's going on. I think investors are just clueless. They talk like they know what they're doing. They really don't. Kind of like aimlessly bumping around. Rates are going to 900%. And here's the homeowner who literally just bought a house like, man, I got one for like 6.25%. Well, that's way too much. I used to pay that. That's the... I have a buddy of mine who runs a men's group. I'll just put it that way. And he says, I can put guys into two categories. The has-beens and the never-weres. I'm going to start using that as a pejorative term for real estate investors. The has-beens and the never-weres. The has-beens sound like this. Oh, man, I remember back in the day, I was buying A-Leaf at $25K a door. They were giving me $40K cash at closing. I was cash flowing $500 a month. I was crushing it. All right, so that's your has-been. And then the never-weres sound like this. I don't know, man. I just think the real estate market's going to crash. It's going to crash. It's just, I don't know when to get in. I mean, I've been going to these meetings since 1982, and I've only bought 4 houses. I just, I don't know. I don't think it's a good time to get in the market. It's just not. Jason, I've been watching you since you did your first case study 10 years ago. And I just don't know if there's ever a good time to get in the market. I don't know. I've had these 3 houses since 1962 that I bought from the second owner. You're like, what? You missed out on like 100 years of appreciation. Yeah, but this market, I remember back in the day, when I bought those 2 houses in 1962, this is what I paid for them. $10. That was when minimum wage was a nickel. And you're like, all right, man. Okay. All right, I got it. So you're really not a real estate investor because you only bought 2 houses in like 40 years. Well, 64, like 60 years. And like time to let's kind of get going here. It's boy, I wish you could, there's so many, I hate using sports analogies, but it's just so great. It's, if you're working with a trainer, I'm working with a trainer, or not necessarily with a personal trainer, but someone who's like skills-based, performance-based. A lot of times they were in the sport. If I want to be Tom Brady and go after that legacy, I'm not going to hire the sports trainer who's couldn't make it on the high school football team. We're not doing that. We're going with somebody who's actually played at a really high level. I was listening to Andrew Huberman actually talk about this. He works with a lot of high performance athletes. And one of the things Dr. Huberman said is he said, look, you can sit down with these athletes and they won't do a thing. Like you could tell them like, here's this new study, read this, eat this, do that sort of thing. They don't care. Now, if you tell them, hey, I work with a group of Navy SEALs, former Army Rangers, specialized special operations operators, and they do this, this, and this, these athletes perk up and go, all right, I'm going to go do that. The question is why? Those guys are top tier athletes. They don't get to pick when they sleep. They're getting shot at all the time. In fact, Huberman says it this way. These guys have a higher shooting percentage than you do while they're being shot at. Pretty sure when you're on the basketball court, you're not taking incoming fire. And these guys are better at hitting a target than you are and a lot further away. So with your professional athletes, they recognize, oh, if these guys are doing it, they got a lot tougher job than I do. I got to throw a ball across the field or throw it in a hoop. These guys are getting shot at. So if they figured out a performance trick, I should probably listen to them. So I get a lot of advice from real estate investors that you hear it and you're like, how many did you buy during COVID? How many you bought in the last year? What have you done in the last 5 years? Oh, well, I bought these houses back, and I'm like, okay, so you got a time machine so I can go back to 82 and buy 17 houses? Oh, you don't. This is the joke Rob and I have had for years. If you want to buy those houses in Katy, Woodlands, Cypress, Sugarland, Pearland, you guys pick all the other nice neighborhoods around town. You want to buy something in those neighborhoods that cash flow with a rental, you need to go over to this room. We have a time machine. It goes back 10 years. And you're going to get in that time machine. You're going to go back in time. That's when you can buy all that real estate. Here's what I do know. We're in a time machine now for all the property you wish you will have bought 5 years from now. Every time I get in front of a group of investors that have been in this business for 5, 7, 10 years, I ask the exact same question. Hey guys, if you could get into a time machine and go back 5 years, would you have bought more property? And everybody says yes. And then I'd say, would you wish you had bought more property even if it were 100% retail, meaning no equity? And everyone keeps their hands raised. Absolutely. Of course. So then I say this. Why do you think this is any different? A couple of you guys could have made millions if you just held on to your real estate that you bought in 2018 and 2019 instead of getting scared and selling it in 2020. We had 40% average, 40% appreciation from December 2019 until last year. If you bought 12 houses worth $185,000 and they didn't cash flow, you just held on to them. You didn't put a tenant in there. If you just held on to them until this year, you would have sold them and made $1.1 million net. It's Jason Bible, Texas Real Estate Mastermind. Okay. Dude, I started working out yesterday, and my shoulder, like the joints in my shoulders are absolutely on fire. It is terrible. Like I need something to like hold my arms up. It's awful. Okay, you ready? It's Jason Bible, Texas Real Estate Mastermind. So I don't know what else is everybody's waiting for. You're waiting for the other shoe to drop. You're waiting for the perfect deal. Fine, wait all you want. I don't really care. I've kind of gotten to this point now where, boy, it is my vice. You know, it's funny. It is some psychological issue. I don't know what it is. I thought maybe I should go to counseling for it, but I must argue with people online. It is a unhealthy thing I do. I don't know why I do it. I see something and I'm like, oh God, okay, here we go. Here we go. And then I just start putting data up and then I'm like, what am I doing? I'm 45 years old. I am, by all accounts, a relatively successful investor. Why am I arguing with idiots online? This is I've gotten better over the last couple of years just because I've gotten so busy. So a lot of times I just post and leave. But I'm like, why are you arguing with these people? They don't, the way I look at things these days is like, all right, what are your goals this year? Okay, Is doing this thing get you towards your goals? No, don't do it. Arguing with idiots gets me to 0 goals, but I still do it. And I'm not talking about like just having a thoughtful conversation back and forth, because that's what a lot of the conversations we have are. No, just generally just guys saying crazy stuff. And I see Logan, you know what? I let Logan Matamashi deal with mostly it's on Twitter. It's really not on Facebook much. It's all on Twitter. So I just let him just read his stuff when he's going back and forth with people on Twitter. And sometimes I wonder if these guys that are in real estate have ever done a real estate deal. You read some of this stuff, and you're like, that doesn't make any sense. Jason, interest rates go up, prices go down. I'm like, when does that ever happen? Interest rates and prices have nothing to do with each other. Interest rates and sales do, but sales are not prices. Everyone's learning that lesson right now. Sales are not prices. And what's interesting is when you seasonally adjust all these numbers, they really didn't move all that much. Now, what happens when rates go down? That's what's weird, is folks will go, well, Jason, if when rates go down, prices go up, then surely when rates go up, prices go down. No, those two things can be mutually exclusive, and they are. And that's the hard part about economics. There's some of it that just doesn't make sense on the surface. It's kind of like when you're training and you're hitting the weights a lot. I mean, you are training and you look at the scale and it hasn't moved. And of course, now everyone knows why. You're losing fat, building muscle. Muscle weighs more than fat, which is why you have to measure yourself, right? My arm's getting bigger, my chest getting bigger, waist getting skinnier, that sort of thing. You got to have some other metrics. But if your only metric is, I'm working out, why aren't I losing weight? Well, you could be eating too much, but let's just assume all things being equal. Well, the weight hasn't changed because you're just getting bigger, you're getting stronger, add more muscle. That's another thing I find, one of the gym analogies I always find fascinating. When I go to the gym and I've started this routine again, and it's just, God, it is awful. It is awful to start. The intensity levels, whenever folks look at me in the gym, they're like, what is this guy doing? Is he on like Coke or something? I mean, it just, you go in, I'm like throwing up, because the guy I work out with, when I started training with him, it's like, it is intense in there, in the weight room. You never see guys work out like this. But you look at this guy, he's almost 50. I don't think he's ever been overweight in his life. And the dude is not only big, he is absolutely shredded. And he told me this years ago when he and I first became friends. He said, Jason, it's real simple. Find somebody in the gym that's got a body that you want, work with that guy. I'm like, well, but what about it? He goes, no, man, I'm going to make it real simple for you again because you're not listening. And this is what he told his wife. Like after his wife had her last kid, it was, hey, babe, let's go to the gym. Pick out one of these gals, befriend them. Y'all work out together. They got the body you want, that's the one you're working out with. It's that simple. It's that simple. No more difficult than that. So I started looking at the same thing in real estate. You want the results that this person has over here? Then you're going to listen to their advice. You're going to follow what they do. Someone starts giving you advice, tips, all that stuff. Then I started asking them, like, well, what does your portfolio look like? Oh, I own this, I do that, I do that. That sounds all really complicated. This is kind of like the guy that's selling the land deed trust subject to owner finance class, no money out of pocket. And I'm like, and then you sit down for 5 minutes, you talk to this guy, and I'm like, look, I've been doing real estate for 10 years. I've got to be over 2,000 deals at this point, hundreds of millions of dollars in real estate. And I'm like, I don't even understand what you just said. Like, I don't profess to be an expert in the legal realm of real estate, but I do know how to get some deals done. And when I hear somebody say there's 65 ways to buy a house, I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. I know a couple. Like there's a couple, that's it. But then you realize they're just trying to sell you the next get-rich-quick scheme. So then somebody says, okay, well, I'm going to do this subject to owner finance, wrap deed, land trust. And I'm just sitting there and I'm going, okay, well, how many of those do you do? Oh, well, me and my power team, we do 100 a year. Well, what does that mean? You know what's funny about real estate? Most of y'all who listen to the show, you're business owners or you work in the corporate realm somewhere. I mean, let's be honest. This is boring business radio. So that's most of the people who listen to our show. What I think's so funny is when I first got into this business, I started going to these classes, and these people would talk in such a way that makes no sense. Oh yeah, I'm doing like 100, me and my power team. Has anybody in the corporate world, I have never heard power team before. Now I'm a part of a team. This is my project team. I've got a group of contractors. Like, that's kind of the world, how the world talks. I don't have my power team doing my land deed trust swap, blah, blah, blah. And you're just like, wow, this sounds really complicated. To buy a house. We're talking about to buy a house, right? This isn't like some big value at risk calculation and we're trying to offset some risk based off these assets we got. No, this is just buying a single family house, right? Because it sounds like you're trying to put calculus on this, and it's not really necessary. It's a contract to buy it, and there's like a contract with the loan company, because that's really what a mortgage is. And then you're going to have another contract with the tenant. It's called a lease. It's pretty simple. We've only been doing real estate since the beginning of time in this world. So if there's a different way to buy a house, I'm all ears, but I haven't seen it. It's pretty simple. Buyer agrees to something, seller agrees to something, close it, move on to the next one. The most wealthy people I know in this business run extremely simple businesses. They're very simple. I do not know anyone that runs a really complicated business. By the way, that goes all the way up to the right underneath the REIT and fund level, meaning families that buy commercial real estate. Guys worth a couple $100 million. It's not real complicated. The financing can get a little tricky, but it's not really that complicated. Here's an asset. What's it worth? Do I have any equity? Yes, no. And that's okay not to have any equity. I'm buying this piece of property here. Does it cash flow? Yes, no. Sometimes it's good if it cash flows, sometimes it doesn't. But then you just put a little addition and subtraction to it, and does it sound like a good deal or not? It's that simple. Sometimes people hide behind spreadsheets because it's some kind of ego thing. And it's like, look, man, this is just buying. This is buy low, sell high. It is no different than that. And if you need 15 steps to do it, I'm willing to bet you're not making that much money, no matter how fancy your watch or your car is. That's the reality of this business. It's real simple. So guys, I'll leave you this. 7% mortgage is dead. Mortgage rates should be headed on the way down unless something crazy happens. And I don't see it. I mean, maybe we go to full employment and they really want to crash the economy, or something else happen. I just don't see rates getting any higher. They're going to bounce around, I'm sure, for a little bit. There'll be some financial news. We'll see what happens. But I don't think we're going to see 7.1 this year. Like I said, caveat is unless something crazy happens. We go into a recession, you can bet rates are coming down. So unless the market gets really, really hot, which I don't see happening, then I think that's where we're headed. So thanks for listening to the show. We'll have a short message after the breaks. Jason Bible, Texas Real Estate Mastermind.